Welcome back, guys, to the most trusted and dynamic channel, The Global Informer, where we provide you the fastest, exact, and thorough information completely about the global personalities. And today's personality is one of such, he was famously known as Atomic Spy. And he is none other than Mr. Klaus Fuchs. So let's dive deep into the life of Klaus Fuchs. I begin straight away. Klaus Fuchs, the physicist who betrayed the atomic secret. Introduction: a betrayal that shook the world. Secrets: some are worth dying for, others worth betraying an entire nation. This is the story of a man whose mind built the most dangerous weapon in human history, and whose conscience made him betray it. Klaus Fuchs, a brilliant physicist, a trusted scientist, a patriot, and a traitor. The man who passed the blueprints of the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union, forever changing the course of the Cold War. To understand this video, I have divided them in sequential chapters. So let's begin with Chapter 1. The Making of a Spy. Early life in Germany. Emil Klaus Julius Fuchs was born in Kassel, Germany in 1911. A brilliant child, raised in a strict Protestant family, Klaus was the third of 4 children. His father, Emil Fuchs, was a respected theologian and a committed socialist. His ideals would later shape Klaus's early worldview, a worldview that would make him a critical figure during the most dangerous conflict humanity would ever face. From an early age, Fuchs showed exceptional academic promise. Mathematics, physics, and chemistry were his passions. He was drawn to the mysteries of the universe, questions that few could answer but many desired to explore. At the University of Leipzig, he distinguished himself as one of Germany's brightest minds. But it was also in the classroom that Fuchs would first begin to understand the world's increasing political turmoil. In the 1930s, Adolf Hitler's rise to power would tear apart not just Germany, but the fabric of Europe itself. Fuchs was no Nazi sympathizer. He despised Hitler's ideology, and this aversion would eventually lead him to make an impossible choice. As the country spiraled into fascism, he found himself at odds with the very government that once gave him an education. In the early 1930s, the growing repression against communists in Nazi Germany led Klaus Fuchs to join the Communist Party. He viewed it as a necessary resistance against fascism, a political ideology that sought to extinguish his belief in equality and scientific progress. But this decision would soon thrust him into a world of espionage and treason that would change history. Fearing for his life and under the constant watch of the Gestapo, Fuchs knew he had to leave Germany. The option to escape was clear. He had to get out or face imprisonment or worse. Now Chapter 2. Escape to Britain. The Scientist in Exile. Klaus Fuchs found his refuge in Britain, where his scientific talents would find new opportunities. He enrolled at the University of Bristol, a place where he could continue his academic career away from the clutches of Nazi oppression. In Britain, Fuchs became a key player in the development of theoretical physics. He made notable contributions to the study of nuclear physics, his research catching the eye of some of Britain's leading minds. But as Europe plunged deeper into war, Britain was increasingly in need of bright minds. The Tube Alloys Project, Britain's attempt to develop its own atomic bomb, was underway. Scientists were urgently recruited to ensure that Britain could compete with Nazi Germany's ambitions. Fuchs was invited to join the project. His expertise was invaluable, and his reputation as a brilliant physicist earned him a critical role. However, by now, Fuchs had already become a man torn between two worlds. His loyalty to the Soviet Union, formed during his years in Germany, had not waned. He knew he had to act swiftly before the Nazis, or the Americans, could control the power of the atom. It was during this time that Fuchs's allegiance would truly be tested. Would he serve his adopted country of Britain, or would he continue his secret ties to the Soviet Union? Moving on to Chapter 3. Los Alamos, the heart of the atomic secret. By 1944, the United States had taken the lead in the race to build the atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project was the most secretive and ambitious scientific endeavor ever attempted. Scientists from around the world were brought to Los Alamos, New Mexico, to create a weapon capable of ending World War II. Among them was Klaus Fuchs, who now found himself at the heart of the most sensitive project in history. His skills as a theoretical physicist were crucial, but Fuchs knew that while he was working to create the weapon of mass destruction, he was also feeding secrets to the Soviet Union. Fuchs's position at Los Alamos was perfect for espionage. He had access to critical nuclear secrets, and his reputation as a competent, trustworthy scientist ensured that no one suspected him. But while others were focused on the bomb's destructive potential, Fuchs had already made up his mind. The Soviets, with their communist ideals, were his true allies. Fuchs began passing detailed information on the Manhattan Project to Soviet handlers, first in America and later in Britain. His actions would shift the balance of power during the Cold War, arming the Soviet Union with the very weapon that the United States had hoped would guarantee its dominance. The Chapter 4. The Secret Handoff. How Fuchs Leaked the Atomic Bomb Design. By 1945, Fuchs's covert activities had expanded. He was no longer just feeding the Soviets general knowledge. He was providing them with blueprints for an atomic bomb. Detailed designs, calculations, and scientific data on nuclear fission flowed into Soviet hands. The Soviet Union, under Stalin's iron rule, had been struggling to catch up to the Western powers. But with Fuchs's help, they could fast-track their development of nuclear weapons. The information he provided was instrumental in helping them build their first bomb, creating a dangerous new parity in global power dynamics. Now the most important, Chapter 5. The Fall, How Klaus Fuchs Was Caught. In 1949, British intelligence was able to decrypt Soviet messages as part of Operation Venona, a top-secret project aimed at uncovering Soviet espionage. Through these decrypted messages, they discovered the name of a scientist in Britain who had been feeding information to the Soviets. Fuchs was arrested in 1950. During interrogation, he confessed to passing secrets to the Soviets, including the details of the atomic bomb's design. The case stunned the world. The very scientist who had been entrusted with the creation of a nuclear weapon had betrayed his nation, his colleagues, and the very ideals he had once espoused. Moving on to the conclusion. A legacy of controversy. Klaus Fuchs, the man who handed the Soviet Union the atomic bomb, had changed the world. His legacy is one of paradox. Was he a traitor, as the West saw him? Or was he a hero to the Soviet Union, a man who helped bring about the balance of power that defined the Cold War? In the end, Fuchs lived out his final days in relative obscurity in East Germany, where he died in 1988. But his actions, driven by a complex blend of idealism, desperation, and betrayal, left a legacy that would shape the world for decades. Now let me take this opportunity to make you all familiar with the very, very rarely known facts about him. Here's a list of lesser known and rarely discussed facts about Klaus Fuchs, going beyond the commonly known aspects of his life. These facts shed light on his personal struggles, ideological transformations, espionage techniques, and the lasting impact of his actions. 1. His family's socialist roots and early communist indoctrination. Fuchs's father, Emil Fuchs, was a Lutheran pastor, but also a committed socialist. Unlike many clergy members of the time, Emil was deeply involved in left-wing politics, which heavily influenced young Klaus's worldview. His mother, Elsa Wagner, died by suicide in 1931, shortly before the Nazi rise to power. This tragic event is rarely discussed, but it deeply affected Klaus and further solidified his disdain for authoritarianism. Klaus's entire family was politically active. His brother Gerhard and sister Christel were both known communist activists, further embedding him in radical political movements from an early age. Second, Nazi persecution and his escape from Germany. As a university student, Fuchs was openly anti-Nazi and was even physically attacked by Nazi student groups for his political views. In one documented incident, he was severely beaten by Nazi thugs at the University of Kiel in 1933. He fled Germany for Britain in 1934, but he did not immediately get a scholarship or funding. He had to rely on support from socialist networks to continue his education. He was stripped of his German citizenship by the Nazi regime in 1935. From then on, he was stateless until he officially became a British citizen in 1935 and 1942. Third, his secret and unexpected recruits into espionage. Most assume Fuchs volunteered to spy for the Soviets after getting involved in atomic research. However, Soviet intelligence, the NKVD, actively targeted him even before he had access to nuclear secrets. The recruiter who initially brought Fuchs into Soviet espionage was Ursula Kuczynski, also known as Agent Sonia, a German-born Soviet spy living in Britain. She disguised herself as a suburban housewife while operating an extensive espionage network. Fuchs never accepted money from the Soviets for his espionage. Unlike most spies who demanded financial rewards, Fuchs believed in communist ideals so strongly that he handed over atomic secrets purely for ideological reasons. The intricate espionage techniques he used. Fuchs rarely met his Soviet handlers in person. Instead, he often left coded messages inside hollowed-out objects in public places like park benches or under loose bricks in walls. To pass information, he would memorize complex physics equations instead of writing them down, making it nearly impossible to track his leaks unless he was caught in the act. He and his Soviet contacts used coded phrases when communicating. For example, "I will see the doctor tomorrow" could mean "I have documents to pass." 5. His double life at Los Alamos and the Manhattan Project. Despite being a foreign-born scientist with communist ties, Fuchs was given extraordinary security clearance at Los Alamos. He had unrestricted access to classified atomic research, including designs of the plutonium bomb dropped on Nagasaki. Many of his colleagues at Los Alamos, including J. Robert Oppenheimer, later expressed disbelief that someone as quiet and diligent as Fuchs had been a spy. His reserved nature helped him avoid suspicion. He was instrumental in the development of implosion-based nuclear bomb designs, information that significantly accelerated the Soviet Union's nuclear program. 6. His spy work directly led to the first Soviet nuclear bomb. The Soviets detonated their first atomic bomb in 1949, just 4 years after the US used nuclear weapons in Japan. Normally, this kind of technological leap would take at least a decade. but Fuchs's stolen secrets gave them a shortcut. Soviet scientists who worked on the first bomb, codenamed RDS-1, later admitted that Fuchs's information was so detailed that they barely had to make any modifications to the design. 7. How he was caught. The mistake that led to his downfall. Fuchs' espionage was exposed through Operation Venona, a top-secret U.S.-British intelligence program that decrypted Soviet communications. However, the breakthrough in identifying Fuchs came from a single slip-up. One decrypted Soviet message referred to a British scientist with access to atomic secrets. Intelligence agencies cross-referenced Soviet archives with known personnel at Los Alamos and found inconsistencies in Fuchs's travel records. British authorities confronted him in 1950, and Fuchs immediately confessed. Unlike many spies who resisted interrogation, Fuchs admitted his crimes within hours, though he downplayed the extent of his espionage at first. 8. His secretive trial and surprisingly light sentence. Despite committing one of the most significant acts of espionage in history, Fuchs was only sentenced to 14 years in prison. This was because Britain did not have specific laws against atomic espionage at the time. He served only 9 years before being released in 1959 due to good behavior. During his time in prison, Fuchs continued to do theoretical physics research, though the British government never allowed him to publish any of it. 9. The U.S. government's fury and the aftermath. The U.S. government was outraged by Britain's handling of the Fuchs case. Many American officials believed he should have been executed, similar to Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who were sentenced to death in the U.S. for a similar crime. His actions were a major reason for the McCarthy era in the U.S., where suspicions of Soviet spies infiltrating American institutions led to widespread paranoia and blacklisting of suspected communists. Some historians believe that Fuchs's espionage may have prevented a nuclear war. By ensuring both the US and the Soviet Union had atomic weapons, he contributed to the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD, which prevented direct conflicts between the two superpowers. 10. His later life in East Germany. A hero or a forgotten man. After his release, Fuchs moved to East Germany, where he was hailed as a hero of socialism. The communist regime gave him a prestigious position in nuclear research. He married a former East German intelligence officer, Margaret Kielsen, but they had no children. Although the East German government celebrated him publicly, Soviet intelligence never fully trusted him again. Some secret files suggest that the KGB monitored him until his death. Fuchs lived a quiet life in Dresden, avoiding political limelight. He never wrote a memoir and rarely spoke about his past, preferring to remain an enigma. He died in 1988, just 1 year before the Berlin Wall fell and communism collapsed in Eastern Europe. Now moving upon the conclusion of the video, final thought. The paradox of Klaus Fuchs. Klaus Fuchs remains one of history's most intriguing figures. Was he a traitor who endangered Western security, or a hero who balanced global power and prevented nuclear war? His motivations, rooted in ideology, guilt, and a belief in scientific equality, set him apart from typical spies driven by money or blackmail. What do you think? Was Klaus Fuchs a villain, a misguided idealist, or something more complex? Do share your views in comments section, and subscribe to our channel for more such real and exact videos, and that too with in-depth analysis. Wait for the next video. Till then, thank you. God bless you always.